I'm on the line with Impact Wrestling star Moose, aka Mr. Impact Wrestling right now. Moose, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. So, Impact has a really busy calendar coming up the next month or two. Some of the events coming up, the newly announced Battle in the Buckeye State in April 24th and 25th. You have the big TNA revival show, There's No Place Like Home, April 3rd. Rebellion is April 19th. Impact's finally back on the road. How do you feel about, getting in front of so many different live crowds in the past year and coming up in the next few months?
Impact has been growing steadily, man, in the past year and a half, 2 years, and it's all been for the great. And I mean, like you mentioned, we're now doing house shows, and we're now doing house shows and it shows that you probably can see yourself as being great on TV, and it's only going to get better, man. I'm happy I'm part of it.
You said in a interview last year that you could easily say that if Scott D'Amore wasn't with the company, that you could see yourself not being there. And can you maybe talk about how you've seen the company improve under his leadership in the past year, or maybe what's the next company goal to make Impact grow as a whole?
I feel like, first of all, to answer your first part of the question, if Scott D'Amore wasn't here, I probably couldn't see myself being here as long as I have been. He's a part of the reason why I decided to re-sign back. And to answer your second question, what can Impact Wrestler do to even grow even larger? I think signing what wrestlers are available out there. There's not a huge pool of available wrestlers, so I mean, I'm sure those guys try their best to find the best guys out there that fit the current roster, you know. And I mean, we just gotta keep the wrestlers as they just got to keep doing their parts and having stellar matches and match of the year candidate matches, and I mean that will help too.
Now, I mean, depending on how you look at it, you're Impact Wrestling, so you obviously can see it as a problem not having that big of a talent pool out there, but in the bigger picture, that kind of speaks to the health of the professional wrestling world, that, talent's getting signed all these other places, so there's more opportunities and more places for these guys to work that maybe weren't there like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the wrestling business in general is great. It's just a weird place. Like you said, a guy will be here for a year, and then you end up seeing him on AEW TV, or a guy will be here for 2 years and end up going to WWE or Ring of Honor. It's just how the wrestling industry is, man. Like you can't expect one guy to be in one company forever, you know. And I mean, is that like part of the struggles we have is keeping guys here long term? Yeah, but we're not the only company that has those struggles. Every company faces that, you know.
Mm-hmm. Now, getting back to Scott D'Amore, you said he had an influence on why you're in the company, but we saw on TV last week that him and Petey Williams kind of took a dig at you at not being champions, but you were Impact Grand Champion. How do you take that slight, and how do you prepare for the match with Petey coming up?
You know what? It's so funny about that. Okay, I'm gonna do some math for you, right? Hope you can follow me. The Impact World Champion was merged with the Grand Champion, right? Mm-hmm. Making them one, right?
Yes.
You know your Impact history, right? So the Impact World Champion and the Impact Grand Champion was merged together, making them one title, right?
Yes.
So technically, the Impact Grand Champion is now the world title, right?
Yes.
Who's the longest reigning Impact Grand Champion?
Is it you?
Yes. And who has won the Impact Grand Champion the most amount of times?
You?
Yeah. So wouldn't that make me a 2-time world champion?
If you go by that math, I think you have an argument there.
Yeah, so for them to say that I've never been the world champion, that is ridiculous, because if the grand champion has been merged into the world championship and is now one, then that means I'm a two-time world champion. But nobody thinks about that. It's kind of like Ric Flair. When they talk about Ric Flair say he's a 17-time world champion. They don't say he's a 17-time WWE champion. They say he's a 17-time world champion. So obviously they're counting his championships when he was at WCW, right? Because that's part of a world championship, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why is that not the same for this situation?
I think you have a pretty good point there.
Okay, so that answers that question. That fixed that problem. So they could say that PD is one over me, or TNA is one over me, but let's look at the facts here. And next week I get to wrestle Petey Williams 1-on-1, so we'll see who's really one over who.
So, not looking past him, but how do you get back in the title conversation, whether it's the Impact World title or if, any of the titles that are in the company right now? You haven't been in a number one contenders match in some time, so how do you get back in that conversation?
It's not something that I'm losing sleep about. Like, if I want a world title shot, I can easily go get a world title shot. There's a lot of things that I'm trying to prove and I'm trying to build on and work on before I step to that world title picture.
Mm-hmm. Now, over the past few months, we've seen you face off with RVD and Rhino, and it kind of seemed like there was this anti-ECW thing going, but you had some matches with Taurus too. Do you feel like there's a cool dynamic with this sort of animal battle that they're doing, playing off of your name Moose and Rhino and Taurus, and somewhere they can go with that?
I feel like Peter will be very upset at Impact Wrestling and probably should send a letter or an email if they haven't already, because of all this animal cruelty going on with Rhino fighting mooses and fighting Taurus. It's just a real crazy thing going. But Taurus, I'll actually say this about Taurus. He's actually very underrated. He's a very, very, very talented wrestler, and I wish we used him more often. Saying that about Taurus, Rhino is Rhino. He's a world champion. He's pretty much a legend. So I like my battles with Rhino. He's taken me places that I haven't been physically, and hopefully at some point we revisit those rivalries. I think Rhino makes me better as a performer and a pro wrestler.
Now, staying with this theme, Shark Boy is, I believe, coming back for the TNA show. Is that something?
My God.
Is that something you have your eye on?
We're gonna get sued by Peter again, taking over TV because all this animal endangered species is going on. Now you know what they need. They need to get a character that he's a hunter and all he does is hunts animals. That's the next character that they need to bring in.
There you go. Now, there's a lot of talk going into this TNA. There's no place like Home Show, and as I've mentioned, you call yourself Mr. Impact, but there's the TNA show. Like, where do you see yourself getting involved in there?
I have no idea what I'm doing in this show, but whatever it is, it's going to be legendary because I am a legend. I'm excited about the show. It is on a huge weekend in Tampa, and where a lot of fans is going to be there for a pro wrestling event. And I'm happy to be part of it. I know last year we ran our show that same weekend, and we drew, I want to say, close to 2,000 people at the show we did last year. So I can't wait to see what we draw this year. It's going to be an exciting time for Impact Wrestling.
I'll throw out a fantasy one, and I know he's not booked, or, Monty Brown. Is that something?
Yeah, Monty Brown is somebody I've been called out several times, but I think Monty Brown is scared of the moose.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think he's scared of the Moose. I think he knows what Moose would do to him. The exact same thing Moose has done to RVD and Rhino and Ken Shamrock and whoever the hell I wrestle at. There's no place like home, and whoever the hell I wrestle at Lockdown, I believe it is. I think. Actually, I'll take that back. I don't think Monty Brown is scared. I think he's a smart man.
Okay, so we'll see what you end up doing on that show. We'll see if he ends up coming back. I know his name comes up a lot. So, staying with the football conversation, you played for 4 different teams. One of them's the Falcons. You have A-Town Beatdown coming up next week, actually. Do you get a sense of hometown pride coming back to that market, or what's the feeling returning to a town that you had such strong ties with in your professional career?
I'm actually very excited to be home. I know I'm usually known as the heel and the bad guy in this on TV and in general, but I'm very excited to see the reaction I get going back home to. Because, I played 4 years of my career in Atlanta, and I lived in Atlanta for 12 years. So Atlanta holds a special place in my heart, and I can't not wait to come back.
Now, can you talk about having the name Moose, the persona? Because when you were a professional football player, you went under your name, and you had to adopt like a character, a name. Can you talk about how it's defined your persona and how effective you think it can be or has been long term for your wrestling career?
I think it's definitely easy to remember. It's easy to remember. It's chanceable. It's definitely helped my brand tremendously, especially when I have the entrance music that I had, my old entrance music, chanting the name, which I've actually thought about going back to, but it's the only thing that's kind of scaring me about going back to that music, to that theme music, is it kind of gives you a baby face pop to, what I'm saying, I'm a heel now, and it's kind of, what I'm saying, it's kind of confusing. Like, do we cheer for this guy? I know he's a bad guy, but his music is telling us to cheer for him,
Mm-hmm.
So I have thought about going back to that theme music, but I'm just nervous about the reaction I would get. And it's not the reaction I want to get because of my character on TV. But to say that, one thing I don't like about the name Moose is I get tied a lot to the animal Moose, and I have my character and that animal has nothing in common, Seriously, because I know we made the jokes about the animal species or whatever, but it's funny that I get a lot of ties to the animal Moose, where my character is nothing. It's just a name that I was given to me, and I've kept that name since I was playing football,
Now, we talked a little bit about free agency. I'm going to stay with the football and get you out on this one. A guy that you had...
I know the question you're going to ask me, where's Tom Brady going to play for?
Where do you want to see him?
Oh, man.
Where do you think he goes? Where do you want to see him?
Honestly, I would love to see him go back to New England. Like, I would love to see him go back to New England, but from all the reports I'm hearing, I don't think that's going to happen. I think, from what everybody's saying, I think he's pretty much a done deal that he's leaving. So, if he leaves New England, I'll say this: if he leaves New England, I either see him going to America's team, or I could see him going to the Titans.
Okay.
And the reason why I say America's team, because, that team has the best offensive line in the NFL. They have great weapons, and they have arguably the best running back in the NFL. And you know how good Brady is when he's around weapons, when he has weapons. And Tennessee, I say that because they have, if I'm not mistaken, the third best offensive line group in the NFL, the best running back in the NFL, and then one of his best friends is a head coach.
Okay. It will be something to pay attention to for sure. But before then, Impact Wrestling is presenting A-Town Beatdown March 6th and 7th at the Coca-Cola Roxy in Atlanta. And 3 big weekends coming up in April. No Place Like Home, the Rebellion pay-per-view, and Battle in the Buckeye State. Moose, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks for talking to me, man.